Hi, welcome to Girl Talk. My name is Jessica and I'll be your host. This is Danielle de la Fuente, and she seriously is one of the most interesting people that I know. She went to Boston University and she got her BA in International Relations. She also has an MLitt in Peace and Conflict Studies from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. She's honestly has like the most extensive experience in peace building, diplomatic efforts, and has worked with the U.S. Department of Defense's, the British Embassy, and the Embassy of Argentina, and so much more. She's talked at the World Bank International Refugee Congress in Istanbul, and the work that she's doing is truly life-changing. I would say not only for the children that she's working with, but for women like me who see what she's doing and know that that I can also make an impact in the life of refugees and other people who are in need. So thank you for coming on the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you. And I'm delighted to be here. And thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate it.
Of course. So Danielle is actually from Mexican and Iranian descent, which I think is such a bomb mix.
I know. It's a little bit of both worlds.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And so I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your childhood and what it was like for you growing up as a woman of color.
Yeah, so I'm half Mexican, half Iranian. I grew up in San Diego, California. For those of you who may have been to San Diego, it's almost like an extension of Mexico. So it's interesting. My father's Muslim, my mother's Catholic, but I did not grow up with my father really in the picture. He abandoned my mother and I when I was 7 months old. So my father really was my grandfather from my mother's side. He sort of assumed that role, but I had a beautiful childhood. And since I was really, really little, I was like fascinated by, you know, like trying to save the world, and I wanted to work at the UN, and I wanted to be an ambassador, and that was sort of like my dream. And so I was really, really lucky because, you know, my parents were able to send me to great schools and to have all these wonderful experiences. We used to travel the world, take all these vacations, and I was really able to kind of understand different cultures and different perspectives and really just immerse in different places and people. And so I guess that's what kind of brought me to really care for individuals.
And that's a beautiful thing. What would you say was that moment that fueled your passion even more towards creating like peace building?
Yeah, so a little bit of serendipitous event. So I studied international relations at Boston, and I wanted to be an ambassador. So of course I thought, well, I have to work at an embassy. Right. And so I landed an internship at the British Embassy, and I thought I was so cool because I would walk in there every day and you would get like misted in this machine, and I felt like I was James Bond. And I was just like, oh yeah, this is for me.
Living the life.
Yeah, living the life. And I would walk in there like if I was like a runway show to work at an embassy. But you know, I learned a lot, and at the time they assigned climate change was my sort of topic, so I would create a media analysis portfolio. So I would attend all the events that had anything to do with climate change, so like the Penguins and Eagles exposition and the Swedish Embassy or this, and from those events I ended up getting a job at the Embassy of Argentina. And I had never in my life ever thought of like working in press or political affairs, but that's sort of what was offered. And I was like, yes, I landed a job. And so, but while working at embassies, I really realized that I didn't actually enjoy the life of a diplomat. I mean, I saw all these diplomats that had amazing careers, that had lived in, I don't know, 30 different countries or tons of places, but their home life was very empty. A lot of their children had drug addictions or lots of issues that were just sort of coming up, and I said, well, you know, I don't want that for me. So, and then it dawned on me, I wasn't British, I wasn't Argentinian, like what was I doing? so I, of course, I did what I normally did, and I found a job, but I found like the most interesting position ever because it was like so shady, the article, and I was like, I didn't even know what I was applying to, and I was like, oh my god, this is perfect, like experience with the Middle East, like this is so interesting. Yeah. And so I end up going to an interview at a military base, and I show up like legally blonde in like a pink suit, and I'm just like, wait, what did I apply to? and it was like, you know, like super intense, hardcore background check. I'm like, oh. But before I knew it, I was actually working for the Department of Defense, and it was there that I really realized, like, yes, I liked the diplomatic air first, but I liked the whole idea of capacity building and peace building because I started off basically organizing events where we would bring generals and ambassadors over to the Pentagon, to Capitol Hill, and you know, to interact and to discuss things like water security, energy security, and the such. And that's when I realized you can do much more through dialogue and just building that relationship. And having people see each other for human beings.
Right.
So just sit, have a meal, like break bread, and discuss your differences instead of, you know, being like, oh, we have to hate each other.
Right. So Danielle is also the founder of Amal Alliance, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about that now. Is that when, in this job, was that when you really started to discover like the refugee crisis that's happening?
Yeah, so, you know, I thought I was pretty well informed in the world, but I was...
mean, right? You're a diplomat, you're like, oh, I know these things.
I'm like, I know these things. And I was sitting at a conference a little over a year ago at the UN, and I was really shocked to learn that there were over, you know, 69 million refugees, and those are the ones that are accounted for. And then over 50 million of those are children, and then half of those are unaccompanied minors. And I'm listening to these numbers, and I was like,
what?
Yeah, I was like, wait a second, this is like a whole generation of children. But what was even more frightening was that they have no access to education, no access to any services. So sitting there, I'm like, wait, so if you don't give these kids skills, they're never going to be employable. They're going to get trafficked. They're going to get harvested for organs. Or wait, those
very vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. But I mean, those are like the good scenarios. If not, you're basically cultivating your next generation of terrorists.
Right.
And so I decided to go on a humanitarian quest and just picked up my passport and went, and really to learn what organizations were doing what services were being provided, where were these refugees, like what were the ages, like et cetera, et cetera.
And correct me if I'm wrong, aren't the majority of these organizations, they're providing like instant relief, right? Like food, water, medications, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So it's usually immediate relief, food, shelter, water, which is very necessary. I don't discredit.
I mean, absolutely.
But I mean, the reality is that these individuals have been really impacted by war and conflict. So you can't pretend that, you know, they've been raped or tortured or, you know, seen horrific things of war. And now because there's a ceasefire, then we're all going to live together and pretend like nothing happened. I mean, that just doesn't work like that. So what ends up happening is eventually the cycle of violence always returns, because it's called intergenerational trauma. It's just the memory of trauma lives in the body, it lives in society, and it just perpetuates. So the only way to really kind of end that cycle is to address things at a root cause, but also provide them an opportunity, because right now they're in a horrific situation. But if you give them hope and happiness and skills and just social competencies, hey, it may not be like they're studying at Harvard, but now they know there's something else.
Right.
And they don't need to be destined to a life of crime.
Right.
So just redirect that energy.
Right.
And so when I learned about this and set out on this mission, I realized that their well-being was really being overlooked. And so I'm a kids yoga teacher on the side. I love yoga. I think it's a great practice. Mindfulness, I meditate every day. And you know, I just started thinking, well, if this has been so helpful in my life, overcoming grief or anguish of any sort, well, then imagine what it would do for these children.
So you really did feel like the emotional and educational needs of the children weren't being met?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there were some organizations that were looking and doing things like this, but, you know, they're so big and they're so bureaucratic that at the end of the day...
So much red tape.
Yeah, so much red tape. And you know, there were organizations giving out blankets when it was like 120 degrees outside, and you're just like, but it's hot. Nobody needs blankets. Yeah, exactly. So when I started, I went and I spoke to tons of kids. I went to refugee camps. I talked to hundreds of kids, and I just asked them, like, tell me, what do you want?
Right.
What do you need?
Want to be doing that you're not doing?
What is missing in your life? Like, what would make you happy? What would bring you joy? And I really just listened, and they, in essence, gave me all the information I had.
But I mean, what better market research, right? Like, whenever you're starting any business, even if it's a nonprofit, 501c3, doing market research on the population that you want to work with is the smartest way to do it. And I think that that's why you have such a unique perspective, because we here in the US and all over the world, we out of sight, out of mind. Like you said earlier today, we were having a conversation, and when you're not presented with all of the facts, you don't know. And you know it's bad, you know it's not good. You know, 40 million children being being refugees, and 20 million of them being completely unaccompanied, and just going having 11 to 17 years of their life where they receive no sort of formal education or anything.
Oh, that's a very good point. And to most often, the average lifespan is they sit in camps 11 to 17 years. I mean, and these camps are horrific. I mean, I've traveled to 78 countries and I've seen all sorts of poverty, but looking into a child's eyes where there's like nothing, it's just a vacant stare, it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen.
I can't even, like, yeah, I know. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about this, because, and yes, this is a show that is totally about wellness and the impact that women of color are making in communities. And I thought that Danielle's perspective is so different and so unique because she's doing it on such a global level.
But it's also simple. At the end of the day, right. You know, I'm not teaching rocket science. So
right, and that's why that's what makes it so impressive. So can you tell us a little bit more about
how it works?
Like how the program works and what exactly, what you're teaching them. I know I know you're teaching them a lot about mindfulness. Yeah. And you know, I'm all about mindfulness. Yes. So I'm like, the fact that you can take a tool like mindfulness into the world and teach these children that are going through so much trauma.
So much trauma.
Tools to deal with it and overcome it. I really admire that.
So what we do essentially is social emotional learning, and we create a safe space. So in the safe space, kids learn, play, and grow. And so we address the trauma by introducing kids yoga and mindfulness, because there's a misconception that if you just like talk it out, eventually the trauma will go. No, the trauma lives in the body. So you actually need to physically have movement to expel that trauma, but then you have to add in all those sort of psychological components. So we do mindful meditations, we do breathing techniques. So most children, the way we do it is very playful. So, you know, they don't know that they're actually relaxing their nervous system by learning how to breathe through the belly. They're being Superman and Spider-Man. So we, you know, teach them how to breathe like Spider-Man. Bring in your web and inhale it in and exhale it out. And, or wait, you're Batman. Like, you know, make sure your invisible cape is like ready to go and launch up. And, but you're doing this with your breath. And so teaching the children different breathing techniques. We use breathing balls and we teach them how to like expand the belly and close the belly. But they think they're playing. And that's the whole point. Like there's no need to make it so technical. They're kids. Let them color. Let them have fun. Let them have a childhood. We do lots of coloring and painting.
Which in itself is therapeutic.
It allows them to find expression. We do creative writing. So we allow children to basically come in and create their own short story. And then they're a published author, and then they paint it. And
oh God, they must love that.
Oh, they love it. And then we do dance, and we dance through movement and expression. So you know, when I started this, I mean, obviously I'm not an expert in everything, and I kind of went out and found these amazing partners. Everyone from like the Urban Yoga Foundation, who's been like doing this for 30 years in the schools, to Mindful Yoga Breaks that created these superhero breaths, to Kids Tales, who's been doing all these stories. And I said, hey, look, you guys are like leaders in your field. You're doing this amazing work. Let's partner. Let's collaborate. Let's do this together. Because one of the things that I think is the most horrific thing is like, giving aid and then just leaving.
Right.
And not giving them the tools. So let's bring in all these leading people.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. But if we create a holistic package that includes the wellness, that includes the mindfulness, that includes the dance, and we hand it over to them, now it's theirs.
Right.
And so now if they're in Germany or in Syria or in Bangladesh or in Kenya or wherever they may be, it doesn't matter. Because they have these things in their toolkit and they can be like, oh, I'm upset. Like, how do I calm down when upset? I can do this or that. And just empower them.
And you have personal experience with this in terms, like in your own life. And that's how you know that yoga and mindfulness works to alleviate trauma and relief and pain.
So I was very close to my grandmother. So when I lost my grandmother, I was just severely grieving. I mean, it was a very difficult time for me. But also, it was during a time that I was going through an inheritance battle with my family. And, in a weird way, I could identify with the refugees because I had like lost everything, and not just on a material level, but more so on an emotional level where, you lost family and connections and ties that were, basically the structure of your life. But I was also quite sick at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't able to exercise. I just didn't have the physical strength. So I did a lot of yoga to keep grounded and keep focused. And it was very helpful in my life because it brought a sense of calmness and serenity. And so just knowing how much it impacted my life, I know that it can definitely dissolve a lot of the darkness that's surrounding them and just turn on their little inner light.
That's so sweet. And I absolutely love that. What can we do as viewers, as human beings, as global citizens? what can we do from home? Because I know that sometimes it feels like such a heavy topic and it's such a deep issue, and we don't necessarily know exactly what we can do to help.
And it's so simple. I mean, one of the biggest things is growing awareness. So in the US, it's so not shown in the media, and this crisis is truly global. I mean, name a country. I was telling her, you know, you have refugees in Mexico, you have refugees in Colombia, you have them in Kenya, in Ethiopia, Somalia, I mean, Bangladesh, you name a country, they're there. And unfortunately, the stigma of the negative connotation persists with that word. And one thing I try to tell people is no parent is going to put their child on a boat into treacherous waters unless the land they're on is ever more dangerous.
Right.
Because no one chooses to just pick up and just leave. And I mean, it's not a choice, and it can happen to you if there's an earthquake, if there's a hurricane. So now these individuals are unfortunately in this situation. So just as human beings, like, help. You know, in our case, we have no overhead, so our programs cost nothing. So it costs about $40 a year to educate a child, which is absolutely nothing.
And unheard of.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it's high because we're only operating in 2 locations right now. But the more locations you operate, the cost goes down. But if you think about it, you know, next time you go to Starbucks and spend that $3, you could have helped, you know, somebody. And it doesn't need to be a big amount. I mean, $3, $4, if everybody, you know, skipped a cup of Starbucks for a month.
The fact that you said $40 a year.
A year.
I could literally give you $50 right now.
Yeah, and you'd be educating a child for a whole year.
That blows my mind.
But also, everybody has amazing skills, you know, web skills, marketing, you know, all these amazing, you know, professions, or wellness. Like maybe you're the leader in sort of, I don't know, some Ayurvedic practice that I haven't incorporated. But there's so much that everybody offers that if we just communicate it and work together, like, we can make this the most amazing package ever.
Right,
and
exactly.
it just, everyone has something to contribute. Like, they don't necessarily have to contribute money. And then that's one of the things, like, I've had people give me promotional videos and, you know, their expertise, and that's invaluable because without them, I wouldn't have been able to get here as fast as I have.
Right. I love that. How can we get in touch with you, Danielle? How can we follow your work and what you're doing, and how can we monetarily, skill set wise support you? Like, what can we do?
I'm the easiest person to get in touch with. I'm on everything. so you can find
all
me
the media
everywhere. I'm like easy to find. But follow us at Amal Alliance. Amal, by the way, means hope. And it also means charity, and also means action. So in multiple languages, it just kind of like made sense. So AMAL Alliance. So that's our username for Instagram, for Facebook, for Twitter. AmalAlliance.org is our website. You can donate there. And then me, I'm Danielle at Amal Alliance. And please email me, ask me questions. I love to meet people and to work with them. And I've learned something from everyone I've ever talked to. So
thank you so much for coming on the show today,
I appreciate it.
And thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And just know that you can make a difference. Like, it doesn't matter what it is you do or how you do it, there's a way that you can make a difference. And if you can just impact one child's life, I mean, that's more than many can say.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
This was such a great conversation. I feel like I learned so much from you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time on Girl Talk.
Bye.
We run the world. Who run the world? Girls.